this first of a series of webinars that is offered to you by the O2 Lab. My name is Stefano Sbarbati, and I will be your host today for this webinar, which is about opportunities and risks of open innovation. As mentioned, this webinar is the first of a series of webinars that the O2 Lab and Invite project have prepared to explain you the opportunities and the benefits that open innovation can bring to your business. This webinar is a part of an e-learning program that was developed during this month by the project, and that is available free of charge for everyone. Before we start, actually, it's worth mentioning that this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be then shared on the O2 Lab and on the platform. Speaking about O2 Lab, quickly before we start, actually, we have recently launched an open call, so we not only offer you a program specifically designed for SME that wants to start their open innovation process, but also financial support for it. We can discuss this shortly at the end of this webinar, and for the moment I would say we just get started with this lesson, and let's try to understand a bit more in depth what open innovation is and what are the opportunities and risks for SMEs. First of all, open innovation. We have a full module dedicated to answer the question, what is open innovation? The concept is already quite known, and most of you are already familiar with it, but briefly, we can introduce the concept. So open innovation basically is the idea that the organizations should use in a more structured and fruitful way ideas, process, and technology that are already available outside of their organization. This in order to capture the value that is out there and transferring it into the products or services or whatever they produce and sell. This is true also the other way around. So there is a lot of unused knowledge and technology that sits in SMEs and organization, and actually this knowledge should be allowed to go outside for others to use, and thus creating value for the company producing this value. The whole idea behind this concept is basically that open innovation can make research and development activities more economically sustainable and viable, and creating new value chains, and at the end generating innovation throughout these value chains. As already mentioned, however, the open innovation process should be designed and developed with a full understanding of its implication, both in terms of business operation and in terms of strategy. The goal of this webinar is actually to provide you with an overview of the risks and opportunities that are underlying the open innovation processes, and in order for you to take full advantage of it and avoid possible risks. So this is a quick overview of what we try to achieve today. So basically, we try to explain what open innovation is and why it is appealing for SMEs. We try to understand what are the opportunities linked to open innovation for SMEs, as well as the risks that are there. So let's start with the first one. So open innovation. I already gave you a brief introduction on this concept before. But what is important here to understand is that it's a common belief that actually this kind of process, open innovation process, only works or are only beneficial for larger enterprise and large company, which have big and established research and development department, and they are able to produce high volumes of products, process, technologies, innovation, and so on and so forth as part of their activities. This is actually true, but it's not the entire truth, because open innovation is also very beneficial for SME, which may not be as big and as structured as large conglomerates, but they do produce innovation. They do have processes and products that can be improved using open innovation, and we actually have a quite bit of success story also in the OE2 lab, and I will share with you in a moment. So SMEs can benefit from open innovation uh, like and probably also more than large companies, since they are in a way quicker to adapt to market changes and inputs, and also they can adapt their posture actually easily, or in an easier way than bigger companies. So that's the reason why open innovation can create a range of benefit also for SMEs willing to adopt it. In this slide, we actually go through some example of these opportunities, or these values that open innovation can bring to a company. And we start with open innovation can bring a broader base of ideas. So the idea is that at the basic of pretty much all the open models around, so not only open innovation, but also open source, open business model, and so on and so forth. So the assumption behind this is that useful knowledge is widespread, and people, or companies in this case, can make their contribution and boost the value of this knowledge application. In this case, in case of open innovation, by opening up to other institutions or companies, an SME can benefit from new idea, from new perspective, new insight, or application of a piece of technology that was not possibly aware of before. Open innovation can also make sense from a mere economic perspective, because actually allows companies to share cost and risk, so division of cost and risk, and also share research and development cost and business risks of bringing, for example, a new product to market. Also, open innovation is beneficial to change the culture in general, but also the culture of innovation within a company, if you want, and unlock also a range of possibilities deriving from a renewed and refreshed internal processes and working culture. So employee in a way are more involved, and their knowledge generation is not underused, sitting there unused in the company, but rather put into work and use at the optimal level. Also, opening up existing knowledge generation process to third parties, contributors, and partners can actually boost the internal learning capacity of an organization. Cooperation actually is not only beneficial for internal processes of an SME or a company, but also for the outputs. So by working together with other partners, you can, for example, develop products that are augmented by technologies and capabilities that probably a company would not have been able to implement autonomously, let's say. So previously referred to the success case that we have here in the O2 lab regarding open innovation in SMEs, and one of them is actually strictly linked to these opportunities that is joint power in this slide. So basically, we had one of the winner of our first open call, which was able not only to enter a new market segment thanks to open innovation approach, but also to bring to this new market segment an improved product by collaborating with another SMA, so by cooperating together. In fact, they were basically able to add to a software stack and image recognition capability that actually create a real added value to this product, and was this very added value that would not have been possible without an open innovation approach. So this very added value that brought them into talk with a major international player in the car making industry. So it's a very hands-on practical example on how open innovation can really change the product, or also can help a company to approach a new market. We have a very interesting in-depth story about this, and you can have a look at it on the OE2 Lab. It's available there, of course, free of charge as always for the content you find it there. So with this say, so joint powers, cooperation is beneficial and can develop products beyond the capabilities, as we just said with this short example, but also improved testing. So by shortening, in a way, the product development cycle, open innovation can also shorten the time to market of this product. So basically bringing a product to market before, for example, one of possible competitor can be the key difference between a successful product or an unsuccessful one. And as a corollary, in a way, of this, this means that you can use the resources you basically save from the development cycle to bring possible customer, or in general customer, into the development process, and learn from their feedback on how to adapt and change your product before you actually release it. So all this set of advantages in a way translate into possible more cooperation with possible partners, more business opportunities, and better and more advanced products that you can bring to the market. So we've seen the light, let's say, in this slide. So light, where this light there is also shadow. We see the opportunities that open innovation can bring you to your company, but of course there are also risks that are linked to approaching or adopting a new a model or a new practice. This is of course true also for open innovation, and in this second part of the webinar we will try to highlight quickly the common risks in which you may incur while implementing your open innovation process. So let's start. One of the major issue or risks in this case in open innovation process is certainly linked to how to manage intellectual properties resulting from this collaboration. This is true why IPR, so intellectual property rights management, is in general and often very complicated for the nature of intellectual properties as such, which are not always easy to identify and to protect. This is a very broad and depth knowledge, so concept, but luckily you can find a bit more information on the OE2 Lab, since we have developed a whole course, a whole training, which is related on how to manage intellectual property in open innovation process. So I would refer you to this course because it's quite in-depth and practical understanding on how to protect shared IP and how to deal with this kind of possible risks. Another one, which is perhaps more organizational than legal risk, is also it's about the relationship that will be built between the partners in an open innovation process. So collaborating with a third party, in fact, is not always easy, and especially when it comes to work together on the development of a product. So as for the IPR issue mentioned before, you also find a course on this on the OE2 Lab, and I will refer you to that to learn how to better deal with cross-company network structure and cooperation, avoid hostility during the process. Other organizational slash managerial issue, I would say, are related to the management of the process as such, and on the allocation of the resources within this open innovation process. Managing a partnership, in fact, can be very challenging and time-consuming, and as well as hitting our own SME internal workflow, both in terms of time allocation and resources allocation. In fact, usually SMEs run very tight in terms of internal resources availability, and managing a partnership can generate an extra load on this company, which is not always easy to deal with. Also, being in a partnership means being able to balance the roles and responsibility in a workflow, and this will likely create, or maybe can create, overlapping in tasks or imbalances throughout the process. So in general, all these organizational and managerial risks should be taken into account when designing an open innovation process and mitigation measures considered before starting the actual collaboration, because of course risk can always arise, but it's way easier, let's say, to discuss management and IP rights while designing a process rather than later during in the middle of a crunch or a product crunch. So it's not always easy to do it then. Another set of possible risks or issues actually spurs from the knowledge management and organizational aspects. So let's try to have a look at them. Strong dependence, so dependency, basically strong dependence on external knowledge can ultimately affect your business model and the way you generate value within your company. This should be taken into account since the beginning of an open innovation process, and such risks should be monitored carefully to avoid possible deviation from your company strategic goal, for example. Also, starting an open innovation process may mean loss of control in business operations. So you can experience this kind of loss of control during an open innovation process, and this can not only show as, for example, loss of control over certain aspects or defined aspects of the development and production, but also can propagate inwards within an SME or within an organization business operations. Shifting from usual business practices, in fact, can generate, for example, more faults also in routine workflow, and in general interfere with the company value creation process. So this risk should be carefully monitored throughout the open innovation process in order to avoid it. Costs is also, of course, a risk, and as probably mentioned for the network management issue, SME should be very careful in monitoring and managing open innovation process, and be very clear in setting up roles and responsibilities to avoid incurring in direct or what's indirect, for what matter, costs that were not planned at the beginning. Legacy issue is also closely related to the management, in a way, of IP, which I was referring before, and as mentioned, I would refer you to the lesson that we have developed for you in O2 Lab to better address and understand this issue. And by the way, we are also planning to set up a webinar which is fully dedicated to how to manage IPR within an open innovation process. So make sure to subscribe to our feeds, social feeds and newsletter, in order to be updated and do not miss this opportunity. So This brings us toward the end of this presentation and this webinar. What we have tried to do was to go through the main opportunities that a company can take advantage of by starting an open innovation process. And as we have seen, there are many opportunities that SME can catch by starting an open innovation process. For example, broader ideas, easier research and development thanks to a division of cost, improved employee involvement and knowledge generation and instruction, and so on and so forth. So there are many opportunities, and these opportunities will likely propagate through the whole value chain of the company and prove beneficial also in the long term. So helping company to enter, for example, new markets and developing new and innovative products. Of course, there are also risks, and we have highlighted some of them, but it's important to understand that these risks should by no means prevent a company or an SME to adopt an open innovation approach, since risk can be in general calculated and assessed, and mitigation measures put in place. And furthermore, OE2 Lab, as we have just seen, has developed a useful content to help companies, especially SME, understand these risks and how to counter them. So this is basically it from my side, and as mentioned, you can find more information on each of the topics that we've touched today in the OE2 lab, in the OE2 lab, and also subscribe to our social feeds. We are planning another webinar relatively soon, which is basically means in November, 12th November 2019, also from 11 to 12. And this webinar will be about cooperation across long distance. So how SME can better cooperate, for example, online or with a company which is not located near in the same cluster, for example, it's a physical cluster or somewhere else. This webinar will be hosted by our colleague at RTC North in the UK, and I strongly invite you to take part of this webinar as well. If there are no questions, I would suggest you to, and invite you once again to register to OE2 Lab and have a look at the wealth of content that we generated there. If you have question, you can basically use the Q&A box, which is available in the Zoom menu, and write down your question there. Okay, since it seems there are no questions, then I thank you all once again. And if you happen to have doubts or you need to suggestion or help on how to implement an open innovation process in your company, then again, visit the OE2 Lab and get in touch with us using this platform. Thank you very much, and